The luxurious honeymoon suite at the Royal Palm Resort in downtown Miami echoed with the sounds of passion, punctuated by the rustle of silk sheets and breathless whispers. But in an instant, the mood shattered like fine crystal dropped on marble floors. "Oh, Ethan," the name hung in the air, sharp and cutting as a knife. It was not the name of the man currently sharing the bed with the woman who had uttered it. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet as silence fell, heavy and oppressive. Daniel Carter froze, his body still entangled with that of his new bride, Sophia. His mind reeled, unable to process what he had just heard. Surely, he must have misheard. But the look of horror dawning on Sophia's face told him otherwise. In that moment, as the echoes of that misplaced name faded, neither of them could have imagined the tragic chain of events that would unfold. The first time Daniel Carter laid eyes on Sophia Martinez, he knew she was special. It was a crisp autumn evening at a charity gala in Miami's art district. Daniel, a rising star in the city's finance scene, had reluctantly agreed to attend at the insistence of his business partner. He was never one for these high society events, preferring the comfort of his cozy den to the glittering world of Miami's elite. But as he nursed his drink in a quiet corner, trying to avoid small talk, he saw her. Sophia stood out in the crowd, not just because of her striking beauty, though that was undeniable, but because of the way she carried herself. There was a quiet confidence in her posture, a sparkle of intelligence in her eyes that drew Daniel in like a moth to a flame. Sophia, for her part, had noticed Daniel too. In a sea of polished businessmen and old money, he stood out. There was an earnestness about him, a lack of pretense that she found refreshing. When their eyes met across the room, it felt like a scene from a movie. "I couldn't help but notice you weren't mingling," she said as she approached Daniel, a playful smile on her lips. Daniel felt his heart race. Up close, Sophia was even more beautiful. Her dark skin seemed to glow under the soft lighting of the ballroom, and her eyes sparkled with warmth and humor. "I'm more comfortable with spreadsheets than cocktail parties," Daniel admitted, surprised by his own honesty. "Daniel Carter," he added, extending his hand. "Sophia Martinez," she replied, her hand warm in his. "And what do you do with these spreadsheets, Daniel Carter?" As Daniel began to explain his work in investment banking, he was surprised to find Sophia not only following along but asking insightful questions. She was a journalist, she explained, specializing in finance and its impact on society. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, touching on everything from the ethical implications of Wall Street to their favorite hole-in-the-wall restaurants in Miami. By the end of the night, as they exchanged numbers, both felt the spark of something special. Neither could have predicted just how quickly that spark would ignite into a passionate flame. In the weeks that followed, Daniel and Sophia were inseparable. Their relationship blossomed with the intensity of a summer storm, passionate and all-consuming. They complemented each other perfectly, Daniel's quiet intensity balanced by Sophia's vivacious spirit. Their friends marveled at how quickly they had become a unit. "When you know," Sophia would say, her eyes shining with love as she looked at Daniel. And Daniel, who had always been more comfortable with logic and numbers than emotions, found himself swept up in the romance of it all. Their courtship was a blur of romantic gestures and shared experiences. Daniel surprised Sophia with impromptu weekend getaways to the Florida Keys. Sophia introduced Daniel to the vibrant world of Miami's art scene, opening his eyes to a beauty beyond the spreadsheets and stock charts he was so familiar with. But it wasn't just grand gestures that defined their relationship. It was the quiet moments too, lazy Sunday mornings spent reading the paper together, Daniel patiently explaining a complex financial model while Sophia listened intently, Sophia dragging Daniel to salsa classes and laughing at his two left feet. As winter turned to spring, their love only grew stronger. Daniel, who had never been one to rush into things, found himself thinking about forever. The idea of spending the rest of his life with Sophia didn't scare him. Instead, it filled him with a sense of rightness, of coming home. On a warm evening in May, just 5 months after they first met, Daniel took Sophia to the Miami Botanical Gardens. As they walked hand in hand through the lush gardens, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Daniel felt a nervous energy thrumming through his body. They came to a stop by a beautiful fountain, its surface like glass, reflecting the fading light of day. Sophia was talking animatedly about a story she was working on, her face alight with passion. Daniel marveled at her beauty, at the depth of his feelings for her. "Sophia," he said softly, interrupting her mid-sentence. She turned to him, a question in her eyes. Daniel took a deep breath, his heart pounding. "These past few months have been the happiest of my life. You've opened my eyes to a world beyond my spreadsheets, shown me what it means to truly live and love." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. "I can't imagine my life without you in it. Sophia Martinez, will you marry me?" For a moment, Sophia was speechless, her hand covering her mouth in surprise. Then, with tears glistening in her eyes, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes. Yes, 1,000 times yes." Daniel slipped the ring, a beautiful diamond solitaire, onto her finger with shaking hands. As he stood, Sophia threw her arms around him, kissing him deeply. They stood there, locked in an embrace, as the last light of day faded and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky. It was a perfect moment, one that both would look back on in the dark days to come, wondering how something that felt so right could have gone so terribly wrong. As Sophia and Daniel threw themselves into wedding planning, their lives became a whirlwind of cake tastings, venue visits, and guest list negotiations. To the outside world, they were the picture of a blissfully happy couple, eagerly anticipating their big day. But beneath the surface of Sophia's joy lurked a shadow, a secret that gnawed at her conscience. In the quiet moments, when she was alone with her thoughts, that secret had a name, Ethan Blake. Ethan had been Sophia's first love, her college sweetheart. They had met during their freshman year at Stanford University, bonding over late-night study sessions and shared dreams of changing the world. Their relationship had been intense, passionate, and at times volatile. Ethan was brilliant but unpredictable, capable of grand romantic gestures one day and disappearing into his own world the next. After graduation, they had tried to make it work, but the pressures of building careers in different cities had taken their toll. The breakup had been messy, leaving both of them hurt and bitter. Sophia had thrown herself into her work, climbing the ranks in journalism, while Ethan had pursued a career in tech, eventually landing a job with a prestigious firm in San Francisco. Sophia had thought she had moved on. She had convinced herself that Ethan was firmly in her past. But then, 2 weeks before her wedding to Daniel, she received an email that shook her to her core. Sophia was alone in the apartment she shared with Daniel, finalizing some details for the wedding, when the notification popped up on her laptop. The sender's name made her heart skip a beat, Ethan Blake. With trembling fingers, she opened the email. "Dear Sophia. I hope this email finds you well. I know it's been years since we last spoke, and I'm sure you're surprised to hear from me now. I recently heard through mutual friends about your upcoming wedding. First and foremost, I want to congratulate you. I truly hope you found happiness. I debated for a long time whether to write this email, but I couldn't let this moment pass without reaching out. The truth is, Sophia, I've never stopped thinking about you. About us. The years we spent apart have only made me realize how much you meant to me, how much you still mean to me. I know this is terrible timing, and I have no right to disrupt your life like this. But I couldn't live with myself if I didn't at least tell you how I feel. I'm going to be in Miami next week for a conference. If you're willing, I'd like to meet up, just to talk, for closure, if nothing else. If you don't want to see me, I understand. I'll respect your decision and won't contact you again. But if there's any part of you that wants to see me too, please let me know. Always yours. Ethan. Sophia read the email once, twice, 3 times, her mind reeling. Emotions she thought long buried came rushing back, the intensity of her first love, the pain of their breakup, the lingering what-ifs that she had pushed to the back of her mind. She closed her laptop, feeling as if the walls of the apartment were closing in on her. She needed air, needed to think. Grabbing her keys, she left the apartment, not sure where she was going, only knowing she needed to escape the turmoil of her thoughts. As she walked the streets of Miami, her mind was a battlefield of conflicting emotions. She loved Daniel, of that, she was certain. He was kind, stable, loving, everything she had ever wanted in a partner. Their relationship was built on mutual respect, shared interests, and a deep understanding of each other. But Ethan. Ethan was her first love. The one who had awakened her passion, challenged her intellectually, made her feel alive in ways she had never experienced before. The memory of their relationship was like a fire that had never fully been extinguished, merely banked and hidden away. Sophia found herself in a small park, sitting on a bench as the sun began to set. She knew what she should do: delete the email, block Ethan's address, and focus on her future with Daniel. It was the logical choice, the right choice. But as night fell over Miami, Sophia made a decision that would set in motion a chain of events she could never have foreseen. With shaking hands, she pulled out her phone and composed a reply to Ethan. Ethan. Your email has caught me off guard. I won't lie, it stirred up a lot of old feelings and memories. I'm happy in my life now, and I'm committed to my relationship with Daniel. But I think you're right about closure. Maybe it would be good for both of us to talk one last time. I can meet you for coffee next Tuesday at 2 p.m. There's a small cafe called Café Soul on Ocean Drive. We can talk there. Take care. Sophia. As she hit send, Sophia felt a mix of relief and apprehension. She told herself it was just coffee, just a chance to put the past to rest once and for all. But deep down, she knew she was playing with fire. She only hoped she wouldn't get burned, or worse, burn everything she had built with Daniel in the process. The day of Sophia's meeting with Ethan dawned bright and clear, a beautiful Miami spring day that belied the turmoil in Sophia's heart. As she dressed for work that morning, she was hyper-aware of Daniel's presence. Guilt gnawed at her for the secret she was keeping. You okay, babe? Daniel asked as they shared breakfast, noticing her distraction. Wedding jitters, Sophia forced a smile, hating herself for the deception. Just a busy day ahead. Big story I'm working on. At 1:45, she made her excuses at the office and headed to Café Soul. The cafe was a cozy spot, tucked away from the bustle of Ocean Drive. As Sophia pushed open the door, the rich aroma of coffee enveloped her, momentarily calming her nerves. And then she saw him. Ethan was seated at a table in the corner, his back to the door, but Sophia would have recognized him anywhere. He had the same broad shoulders, the same confident posture that had first attracted her all those years ago. As if sensing her presence, Ethan turned. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Sophia, Ethan said softly as he stood, using the old nickname that only he had ever called her. You look beautiful. Sophia felt a flush creep up her neck. Ethan looked good, the years had been kind to him. He was dressed in a sharp suit that spoke of his success in the tech world, but his eyes were the same warm brown she remembered, filled with a mixture of nervousness and hope. Hello, Ethan, she managed, taking the seat across from him. It's good to see you. For a moment, neither spoke, the weight of their shared history hanging between them. Then, as if a dam had broken, they began to talk, about their lives, their careers, the years that had passed since they had last seen each other. Sophia found herself laughing at Ethan's stories, falling into the easy rhythm they had always shared. I've missed this, Ethan said softly, reaching across the table to take her hand. Missed you. Sophia knew she should pull away, but she found herself frozen, caught in the intensity of Ethan's gaze. Ethan, I know, she began. I know you're engaged, he interrupted. I know I have no right to come back into your life like this. But, Sophia, I had to see you. Had to know if there was still something here. Sophia felt tears pricking at her eyes. It's not that simple, she whispered. I love Daniel. He's good for me. Stable. Kind. I don't know what I'm doing here, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. This isn't fair to Daniel. I should go. But even as she said the words, she made no move to leave. Instead, she found herself leaning closer to Ethan, drawn in by the familiar scent of his cologne, the warmth of his hand on hers. Sophia, Ethan murmured, his face inches from hers. Tell me to stop. Tell me you don't feel this too, and I'll walk away. I'll never bother you again. Sophia knew what she should say, knew the right thing to do. But in that moment, caught up in the whirlwind of emotions and memories, she found herself closing the distance between them, her lips meeting Ethan's in a kiss that was both familiar and thrillingly new. It lasted only a moment before Sophia pulled away, reality crashing back in. I can't, she gasped, standing so abruptly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. I'm sorry, Ethan. This was a mistake. What Sophia didn't know, couldn't have known, was that her world was about to be shattered in ways she could never have imagined. The kiss in the cafe was just the beginning of a tragedy that would soon unfold, leaving lives destroyed and futures forever altered. The days following Sophia's meeting with Ethan were a blur of guilt, confusion, and mounting anxiety. She threw herself into wedding preparations with a frantic energy, as if by focusing on the details of flowers and seating arrangements, she could somehow erase the memory of that stolen kiss. Daniel, caught up in his own work and trusting in Sophia's love, noticed nothing amiss. His unwavering faith in her only served to deepen Sophia's guilt. Every loving gesture, every soft word from Daniel was like a knife twisting in her heart. At night, lying awake beside Daniel's sleeping form, Sophia wrestled with her conscience. She knew she should tell him about the meeting with Ethan, about the kiss. But every time she worked up the courage, the words died in her throat. She told herself she was protecting Daniel, sparing him pain. Deep down, she knew she was really protecting herself. Everything will be perfect, Daniel would assure her, pulling her into his arms. I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with you. His words, meant to comfort, only added to Sophia's anguish. She loved Daniel, she truly did. But the ghost of her feelings for Ethan haunted her, making her question everything she thought she knew about love and commitment. The evening before the wedding, Sophia sat alone in their apartment, surrounded by gifts and well-wishes from friends and family. Daniel was out with his groomsmen, enjoying a low-key bachelor party. The silence of the apartment felt oppressive, leaving Sophia alone with her tumultuous thoughts. Almost without conscious decision, she found herself reaching for her phone. Before she could talk herself out of it, she had typed out a message to Ethan. I can't stop thinking about you. About us. I don't know what to do. I love Daniel, but seeing you again has stirred up so many old feelings. I'm scared, Ethan. Scared of making the wrong choice, of hurting people I care about. What we had was intense and beautiful, but was it real? Was it lasting? Or am I just getting cold feet? I wish I knew what the right thing to do was. Her finger hovered over the send button for what felt like an eternity. Finally, with a shaky exhale, she pressed it. The message disappeared into the ether, carrying with it the potential to upend multiple lives. Sophia waited, her heart pounding, for a response. Minutes ticked by, stretching into an hour. No reply came. She alternated between relief and disappointment, unsure which emotion was more unsettling. Finally, exhausted by the emotional roller coaster of the past weeks, Sophia fell into a fitful sleep on the couch. She didn't hear Daniel return home in the early hours of the morning, didn't feel him gently lift her and carry her to bed. As he tucked her in, Daniel noticed Sophia's phone on the coffee table. He picked it up, intending to plug it in to charge. As he did, the screen lit up with a notification, a response from Ethan. Sophia. I understand your confusion. What we had was real, and I think it could be again. But I can't make this decision for you. You need to follow your heart. If you have any doubts about marrying Daniel, maybe that's a sign. I'll be at the Miami Beach boardwalk tomorrow at noon if you want to talk. Whatever you decide, know that I'll always care for you. Always yours. Ethan. Daniel stared at the message, his world tilting on its axis. The phone slipped from his suddenly numb fingers, clattering to the floor. The noise stirred Sophia, who blinked awake groggily. Daniel, she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. What time is it? But as her eyes focused on Daniel's face, contorted with a mixture of pain and fury, she knew. In that moment, as understanding dawned in Sophia's eyes, the foundations of their relationship crumbled. The morning of what should have been the happiest day of their lives dawned with a palpable tension in the air. Sophia and Daniel moved around each other in their apartment like wary strangers, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavily between them. Daniel had barely slept, his mind replaying the message he had seen over and over. The hurt and betrayal he felt warred with his love for Sophia, leaving him feeling hollowed out and lost. He wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but a part of him was terrified of what those answers might be. Sophia, for her part, was caught in a maelstrom of guilt and fear. She knew Daniel had seen the message, his coldness, the way he avoided her gaze, told her everything she needed to know. She opened her mouth several times to speak, to explain, to beg forgiveness, but each time, the words failed her. As they prepared to leave for the church, Daniel finally broke the silence. Is there something you want to tell me, Sophia? His voice was low, controlled, but Sophia could hear the pain and anger simmering beneath the surface. Sophia felt her heart constrict. This was her moment, her chance to come clean, to salvage what they had. But fear gripped her, fear of losing Daniel, fear of the unknown. I don't know what you mean, she lied, hating herself even as the words left her mouth. Daniel's jaw clenched, his eyes hardening. Without another word, he grabbed his keys and stormed out of the apartment. Sophia was left alone, her wedding dress hanging accusingly in the corner, a symbol of promises about to be broken. The St. Mary's Cathedral, a historic landmark in Miami's downtown, was abuzz with activity. Guests in their finest attire filed in, filling the pews with a sea of vibrant colors. The air was thick with the scent of flowers and the low hum of excited conversation. In a small room off the main sanctuary, Sophia sat before a mirror, her bridesmaids fluttering around her like anxious butterflies. They chattered about hair and makeup, about the beautiful day, oblivious to the storm raging in Sophia's heart. Girl, you look absolutely stunning, her maid of honor, Isabella, gushed. Daniel is going to lose his mind when he sees you. Sophia managed a weak smile, her stomach churning. She hadn't seen Daniel since he had left the apartment that morning. Was he even here? Would he go through with the wedding after what he had discovered? The uncertainty was eating her alive. In another room, Daniel paced back and forth, his groomsmen watching with growing concern. His best man, Marcus, finally spoke up. Hey, man, you okay? You're looking a little green around the gills. Daniel stopped his pacing, running a hand over his face. I don't know if I can do this, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus's eyebrows shot up. Cold feet? That's normal, bro. But you and Sophia, you're solid. You got this. Daniel let out a bitter laugh. If only Marcus knew. The image of that message flashed through his mind again, stoking the fire of his anger and hurt. But beneath it all, there was still love. Despite everything, he still loved Sophia. The thought of losing her, of walking away from everything they had built together, was almost unbearable. As the minutes ticked by, bringing them closer to the ceremony, both Sophia and Daniel grappled with their decisions. The weight of their choices hung over them like a Damocles sword, ready to fall. The ceremony proceeded as if in a dream. Sophia and Daniel spoke their vows, their voices steady even as turmoil raged within them both. As they exchanged rings, their hands shook slightly, the cool metal a stark contrast to the heat of their conflicted emotions. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the priest's voice rang out. "You may kiss the bride." Daniel hesitated for a fraction of a second before leaning in. The kiss was brief, almost perfunctory, lacking the joy and passion that should have marked such a moment. As they turned to face their cheering friends and family, both Sophia and Daniel wore smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. They had done it. They were married. But as they walked back down the aisle, confetti raining down around them, both knew that their challenges were far from over. The secrets and doubts that had plagued them remained unresolved, casting a shadow over what should have been the brightest day of their lives. The reception was held at the luxurious Ocean View Ballroom. The evening progressed in a blur of toasts, dances, and well wishes. Sophia and Daniel played their parts perfectly, accepting congratulations with gracious smiles and sharing tender looks that, to the casual observer, spoke of deep love. But those closest to them sensed that something was off. Isabella, ever observant, cornered Sophia during a quiet moment. "Okay, spill," she demanded in a low voice. "What's going on with you and Daniel? And don't tell me it's nothing, I know you too well for that." Sophia felt her carefully constructed facade begin to crack. "I've made a terrible mistake, Isabella," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I don't know if Daniel will ever forgive me." Before Isabella could press for more details, they were interrupted by the DJ announcing that it was time for the couple's first dance. Sophia plastered on a smile and made her way to the dance floor, where Daniel was waiting. As they began to sway to the soft strains of their chosen song, Daniel finally broke his silence. "Why, Sophia," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the music. "Why Ethan? Why now?" Sophia felt tears pricking at her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Daniel," she whispered back. It was a moment of weakness. It didn't mean anything. Daniel's arms tightened around her, whether in comfort or restraint, she couldn't tell. "Do you love him?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Sophia opened her mouth to deny it, to reassure Daniel of her love for him, but the words stuck in her throat. Her hesitation was answer enough. As the song ended, Daniel abruptly let go of her and strode off the dance floor, leaving Sophia standing alone in the center of the room. She could feel the curious stares of their guests, could hear the whispers starting to circulate. But in that moment, all she could focus on was the rigid set of Daniel's shoulders as he disappeared into the crowd. The breaking point came later that night. The reception had been a whirlwind of forced smiles and tense silences. As the last of the guests departed, Sophia and Daniel retreated to their honeymoon suite at the Royal Palm Resort. The weight of unspoken words and hidden truths hung heavy between them. Daniel poured himself a generous glass of whiskey, downing it in one gulp as Sophia nervously fiddled with her wedding gown. The alcohol buzzed through his system, dulling the edge of his pain and anger. "We should talk about this," Sophia said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel turned to her, his eyes dark with a mixture of desire and fury. "I don't want to talk," he growled, closing the distance between them in 2 quick strides. His lips crashed against hers, hungry and demanding. Sophia responded instinctively, her body arching into his touch even as her mind reeled with confusion and guilt. They fell onto the bed in a tangle of limbs and expensive fabric, hands frantically pulling at clothes. Their lovemaking was intense, almost violent in its desperation. Daniel's touches were possessive, as if he was trying to erase the memory of Ethan from Sophia's skin. Sophia clung to him, tears streaming down her face as pleasure and pain intertwined. As the tension built, Sophia felt herself getting lost in the sensations. Her mind began to drift, memories of past encounters flooding her consciousness. In the heat of the moment, as waves of pleasure crashed over her, a name escaped her lips. Ethan. The cry echoed in the sudden silence of the room. Daniel froze above her, his body rigid with shock. Slowly, he pulled back, staring at Sophia with a look of utter betrayal. "Daniel, I'm sorry, I didn't mean," Sophia began, but her words were cut off as Daniel's hands wrapped around her throat. "How could you?" he snarled, his grip tightening. "On our wedding night?" Sophia clawed at his hands, her eyes wide with terror. She tried to speak, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, but no sound came out. The pressure on her windpipe increased, black spots dancing at the edges of her vision. In her final moments of consciousness, Sophia's mind flashed to Ethan, to the life they might have had. As darkness closed in, she realized with a pang of regret that she would never get the chance to make things right. Daniel watched as the light faded from Sophia's eyes, his rage giving way to horror as he realized what he had done. He released his grip, but it was too late. Sophia lay still and silent beneath him, her unseeing eyes staring accusingly at the ceiling. In the span of a few moments, their wedding night had turned from a celebration of love to a scene of unthinkable tragedy. The honeymoon suite, meant to be a sanctuary for their new life together, had become the stage for its violent end. As the reality of his actions sank in, Daniel stumbled away from the bed, his mind reeling. The sound of Sophia's final cry, his rival's name, echoed in his ears, a haunting reminder of the jealousy that had driven him to this unforgivable act. Outside, the Miami skyline glittered indifferently, unaware of the dark turn of events that had unfolded behind the hotel's elegant facade. In room 1542 of the Royal Palm Resort, a love story had come to a tragic end, leaving behind a grieving family, a ruined future, and a newlywed-turned murderer.